The dining room was a battlefield, the air thick with the scent of rosemary and unspoken grudges. I stood at the threshold, clutching a bottle of Merlot like a shield, my heart pounding as my sister's voice sliced through the chatter. "It's cute you show up, Claire. Like anyone expects you to stay." Her words landed like a slap, and every eye at the table, Mom's, Dad's, my brothers, flickered with the weight of years we'd never unpacked. I was 30, the eldest, the one who'd left. 10 years ago, I'd packed a suitcase and fled our claustrophobic Connecticut suburb for Chicago, chasing a life that didn't feel like drowning. I'd built something, friends, a graphic design career, a studio apartment with plants I didn't kill. But every return to this house, to this table, felt like stepping into a time capsule of blame. My sister, Lily, 28 and sharp as a blade, never let me forget it. "You abandoned us," she'd said once, when we were teens, her voice raw after I missed her high school play. I hadn't known how to explain then that I wasn't running from her, just from the suffocation of a family that expected me to be their glue. Tonight was Mom's 60th birthday, the first time we'd all been together since Dad's heart scare 2 years ago. I'd driven 6 hours. My stomach knotted, hoping for a truce. Instead, Lily's smirk greeted me, her perfectly manicured nails tapping the tablecloth. "What's the occasion, Claire?" "Feeling guilty again," she said, loud enough for our brother, Ethan, to choke on his water. Mom's lips tightened, but she said nothing, arranging her napkin like it could fix us. I forced a smile, setting the wine down. "Just here for Mom," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. But inside, I was unraveling. Why did it always feel like I was auditioning for a place in my own family? Ethan, 35 and perpetually neutral, avoided my gaze, poking at his salad. Dad, silent as ever, carved the roast like it was his only job in the world. I slid into my seat, the same one I'd had as a kid, the wood worn smooth under my fingers. The familiarity stung. The dinner dragged on, each clink of silverware a countdown to the next jab. Lily leaned back, her blonde hair catching the chandelier's light. "So, Claire, still living the dream in Chicago? Or is it just easier to pretend you're too busy for us?" Her tone was sugar-coated venom, and I felt Mom's hand tense on mine under the table. I wanted to scream, to tell her I'd spent years trying to prove I was enough for them, for myself. Instead, I sipped my wine, the bitterness mirroring my thoughts. "Lily, enough," Mom finally said, her voice soft but firm. Lily rolled her eyes, and something in me snapped. I stood, my chair scraping the floor. "You think I don't care?" I said, my voice shaking. "You think I left because I wanted to hurt you?" The room went still, forks frozen midair. Lily's smirk faltered, but she didn't look away. "You left because you're selfish," she spat. "You always were." I don't know what made me do it, maybe the wine, maybe the weight of a decade's worth of guilt, but I grabbed my glass and hurled it against the wall. It shattered, red wine dripping like blood. Mom gasped. Ethan swore, and Dad finally looked up, his face unreadable. Lily's eyes widened, but she didn't flinch. "Nice performance," she said, clapping slowly. "Really proves you belong here." I stormed out, the cold November air hitting me like a slap as I stumbled onto the porch. Behind me, the house buzzed with their voices, Mom's pleading, Ethan's placating, Lily's defiant. I leaned against the railing, my breath visible in the dark, and wondered why I kept coming back. Was it love? Duty? Or just the desperate hope that one day they'd see me? Inside, I heard footsteps. Ethan appeared, his coat half on, his expression torn. "Claire, don't go," he said. "She doesn't mean it. She's just hurt." I laughed, bitter and raw. "Hurt? She's been sharpening that knife for years, Ethan. And you all let her." He looked away, and I knew he wouldn't fight for me. No one ever had. I drove to a motel that night, the neon sign flickering like my resolve. As I lay on the stiff bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized this wasn't just about Lily's words. It was about the family I'd never fit into. The one that had decided long ago I was the one who didn't belong. But maybe, just maybe, I could change the story. Not for them, but for me. The motel room smelled of stale coffee and regret. I lay awake. The hum of the highway outside my window, a restless companion. Lily's words echoed in my head. Each syllable a needle. It's cute you show up. I'd spent a decade running from this family. But I hadn't escaped. Not really. My phone buzzed Mom's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, unable to face her apologies. The ones that always came too late. By morning, I was back in my car, the Connecticut countryside blurring past. I didn't know where I was going until I pulled into the parking lot of Lily's boutique, a chic little shop she'd opened 3 years ago. I'd never visited. Always too busy. Too distant. The sign read Lily's Charm, and I hated how it suited her sharp, polished, untouchable. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, debating whether to confront her or drive away. Then I saw her through the window, laughing with a customer, her face soft in a way I hadn't seen in years. It twisted something in me, jealousy, maybe, or longing for the sister I'd lost. I walked in, the bell above the door jingling like a warning. Lily froze, her smile vanishing. "Claire," she said, her voice flat. "What do you want?" No warmth. No surprise, just a wall. The customer excused herself, leaving us alone among racks of silk dresses and overpriced candles. "We need to talk," I said, my throat tight. "About last night. About everything." She crossed her arms, her green eyes narrowing. "You don't get to waltz in here and demand closure. You left. Claire. You don't get to play the victim now." Her words stung, but I saw something flicker in her facebane, raw and unguarded. I took a step closer. "I didn't leave to hurt you, Lily. I left because I was drowning. You think I wanted to lose you?" She laughed, sharp and hollow. "Lose me? You didn't even try to keep me. You were too busy being the perfect daughter who could do no wrong." I blinked, stunned. Perfect. Me. The one who'd spent her childhood tiptoeing around Dad's silences and Mom's expectations. "You're wrong," I said, my voice breaking. "I was never perfect. I was just trying to survive." Lily turned away, busying herself with a stack of receipts. "You survived by leaving us behind. Do you know what it was like after you left? Mom cried for weeks. Dad shut down. And she stopped, her hands trembling. I had to be the one to hold it together. You got to run off to your big city life, while I stayed here, picking up the pieces." I wanted to argue, to tell her I'd been broken too, that Chicago wasn't an escape but a lifeline. But her words cracked something open. I'd never seen it from her side, never thought about the weight she'd carried. "I didn't know," I whispered. I thought you hated me." "I did," she said, her voice barely audible. "Sometimes. I still do." The honesty gutted me. I wanted to reach for her, to hug her like we used to when we were kids, sharing secrets under the covers. But the space between us felt like a canyon. "Then why do you keep pushing me away?" I asked. "Why make it hurt so much?" She didn't answer, just pointed to the door. "Go, Claire. I have a business to run." I left, my chest aching. But as I stepped into the sunlight, I felt a shift. This wasn't over. I couldn't let it be. I drove to Mom's house next, needing answers, needing to understand why our family had fractured and why I'd been cast as the villain. Mom was in the garden, her hands buried in soil, her face lined with years of quiet endurance. "Claire," she said, brushing dirt from her gloves. "I didn't think you'd come back after last night." I sat on the bench beside her, the air heavy with the scent of lavender. "I need to know, Mom, why does Lily think I abandoned her? Why does it feel like I'm the outsider?" She sighed, her eyes distant. When you left, Claire, it broke something. Lily idolized you. You were her big sister, her hero. But you didn't call, didn't visit. She felt like she wasn't enough to make you stay. Her words hit like a freight train. I thought I was protecting myself, but I'd left a wound behind one I'd never seen. I didn't mean to hurt her, I said, tears burning my eyes. I was just trying to find myself. Mom reached for my hand, her grip warm and steady. I know, sweetheart. But sometimes, love hurts before it heals. I stayed there, letting her words sink in, wondering if I could ever bridge the gap I'd created. The next morning, I found Ethan at the diner where we used to sneak milkshakes as kids. He was hunched over a coffee, his law firm's logo embroidered on his jacket, looking more like a stranger than my brother. I slid into the booth across from him, the vinyl squeaking under me. You didn't stick up for me, I said. No preamble. At dinner, you just sat there. Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. Claire, it's not that simple. Lily's complicated. And you showing up after years of radio silence doesn't help. His words stung, but they weren't wrong. I'd been a ghost in their lives, popping in for holidays, sending postcards that felt more like apologies than promises. I'm trying now, I said, but it feels like I'm fighting a war I didn't start. He leaned back, his brown eyes searching mine. You didn't start it, but you didn't stop it either. Lily's been angry for years. You were her world. Claire, when you left, she didn't just lose a sister, she lost her compass. I stared at my untouched coffee, the steam curling like my thoughts. I'd always seen Lily as the strong one, the one who didn't need me. How had I gotten it so wrong? Tell me how to fix it, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan shook his head. You can't fix it overnight. But you can start by showing up not just for Mom's birthday, but for the messy stuff. The real stuff. He paused, then added, she's getting married. You know, next month. Did she even tell you? The words hit like a punch. Married. Lily, my little sister, who used to braid my hair and steal my sweaters, was building a life I knew nothing about. No, I said, my throat tight. She didn't. Ethan reached across the table, his hand brushing mine. She didn't tell you because she's scared you'll disappear again. Prove her wrong. Claire. I spent the day wandering our old neighborhood, passing the park where Lily and I used to swing, the library where we'd hide from Dad's bad days. Memories flooded back her laughter, her stubborn streak, the way she'd cling to me when thunderstorms hit. I'd been her protector once. Could I be that again? That evening, I went to Lily's apartment, a sleek loft above her boutique. She opened the door, her expression guarded. What now, Claire? She asked, leaning against the frame. I held up a photo I'd found in Mom's attic, a Polaroid of us at 12 and 10, grinning in matching overalls. I found this, I said, my voice trembling. I don't want to lose you again. She took the photo, her fingers brushing mine, and for a moment, I saw the girl she used to be. But then her face hardened. You can't just show up with a picture and expect everything to be okay, she said. You left me, Claire. You left me to deal with Mom's breakdowns, Dad's silence, everything. And now you want to play sister again. I'm not playing, I said, stepping closer. I'm here. I want to know you, your life, your wedding, everything. I'm not leaving this time. She stared at me, her eyes glistening, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her armor. You don't get it, she whispered. I needed you then. Not now. She closed the door, leaving me in the hallway with the Polaroid and a heart full of shards. I didn't go back to the motel. Instead, I drove to the church where Lily's wedding was set to happen, a small stone building on the edge of town. I sat in the empty pews, the silence pressing against me, and made a vow I wouldn't give up. Not on her. Not on us. The next day, I started small. I texted Lily, not expecting a reply. I'm sorry. I want to be there for you. Tell me how. No response came, but I didn't stop. I sent her a coffee order from our favorite cafe. Left a voicemail about a dress I thought she'd love for her honeymoon. Each gesture felt like tossing a pebble into a lake, hoping for ripples. I didn't know if she'd ever forgive me, but I had to try. A week passed, and Lily's silence was deafening. I stayed in town, renting a room at a bed-and-breakfast, determined to prove I wasn't running. I spent my days sketching in a notebook designs inspired by Lily's boutique, all sharp lines and soft colors. Like her. I mailed one to her, a drawing of a dress I imagined her wearing, with a note, for your wedding, if you'll let me help. No reply, but I kept going, sending small gifts, leaving voicemails she didn't return. Each unanswered gesture felt like a rejection, but I refused to let it break me. One afternoon, Mom called me to the house. She was baking, the kitchen warm with the scent of cinnamon. Lily's struggling, she said, kneading dough with steady hands. Her fiancé, Mark, is wonderful, but she's terrified. She thinks everyone leaves. I nodded, my chest tight. I knew that fear hadn't I lived it, too. I want to be there for her, I said, but she won't let me in. Mom set the dough aside, her eyes meeting mine. Then keep knocking. Claire. She's worth it. You both are. Her words carried me through the next days. As I showed up at Lily's boutique, her apartment, even the cafe she frequented, I didn't push, just made myself visible. A quiet promise that I wasn't leaving. One evening, I found her at the park, sitting on our old swing set. The sun was setting, painting the sky in pinks and golds. And she looked small, vulnerable, her hands gripping the chains. I sat on the swing beside her, saying nothing. After a long silence, she spoke. Why are you doing this? Claire. Why now? Because I love you, I said simply. And I'm done letting you think I don't. She didn't look at me, but her shoulders softened. You hurt me, she said, her voice barely audible. When you left, I thought it was my fault, that I wasn't enough. The confession broke something in me. I reached for her hand, and this time, she didn't pull away. I was scared, I admitted, of being stuck, of losing myself. But I never meant to lose you. We sat there, swinging gently, the creak of the chains filling the silence. For the first time, I felt a thread of hope. Will you let me help with the wedding? I asked. She didn't answer, but she squeezed my hand, and that was enough. The next day, she texted, meet me at the boutique. 3 p.m. When I arrived, she was waiting, a stack of fabric samples on the counter. I saw your sketch, she said, her tone guarded but softer. It's good. Really good. I smiled, my heart lifting. Can I help with the dress? I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. But don't expect me to make this easy. We spent hours together, pinning fabric, sketching designs. It wasn't perfectly snapped when I suggested lace, and I bristled at her critiques, but it was a start. We talked, not about the past, but about her wedding, her hopes, her fears. I learned about Mark, a quiet teacher who loved her fiercely, and I saw the way her eyes lit up when she spoke of him. For the first time, I felt like her sister again. By the end of the week, we designed a dress sleeveless, elegant, with a train that flowed like water. It was hers, but it was ours, too. A piece of us woven together. As we worked, she let slip small truths, how she'd envied my freedom, how she'd felt trapped by our family's expectations. I shared my own how I'd run to Chicago to escape the weight of being the perfect daughter. We didn't fix everything, but we were talking, and that was more than I'd dared hope. On Friday, she invited me to meet Mark. He was kind, with warm eyes and a laugh that put me at ease. Lily talks about you a lot, he said, and I caught her blush. Good things. I hope, I teased. She rolled her eyes, but there was no venom in it. For the first time, I felt like I might belong. The wedding was 3 weeks away, and Lily and I were finding a rhythm. We met daily at her boutique, sketching, sewing, arguing over thread colors. It wasn't easy, her sharp edges hadn't dulled, and my patience frayed, but we were building something. One afternoon, as we pinned the hem of her dress, she said, "You're good at this, Claire. Why didn't you ever tell me you could design?" I shrugged. Threading a needle? You never asked. Her silence lingered, and I knew she was thinking of all the years we'd lost. I wanted to ask her about them, to dig into the pain we'd both buried. But I held back. This was her time, her wedding, her moment. I wouldn't ruin it with old wounds. Instead, I focused on the dress, on the way it hugged her frame, on the smile she tried to hide when she saw herself in the mirror. But the past wasn't done with us. One evening, Dad called me to the house. He was in his study, surrounded by books he never read, his face grayer than I remembered. "Claire," he said, his voice heavy, "I owe you an apology." I froze, my heart racing. Dad never apologized. He was the stoic one, the one who let Mom handle the emotions. "For what?" I asked, bracing myself. "For letting you think you weren't enough," he said. "When you left, I didn't stop you. I didn't fight for you. I let Lily believe it was your fault." His words were a knife, cutting through years of silence. I wanted to cry, to yell, but I just sat there, letting them sink in. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked finally. He looked away, his hands trembling. "Because I was scared, too, of failing you all." I left his study shaken, but lighter. For the first time, I saw him not as the distant father I'd resented, but as a man carrying his own regrets. I called Lily that night, needing to share it, but she didn't answer. Instead, she showed up at my B&B the next morning, her eyes red. "I heard you talk to Dad," she said. "He told me everything." We sat on the porch, the morning air crisp. "I didn't know he felt that way," she said. "I thought he was just disappointed in you, like I was." I nodded, my throat tight. "We all got it wrong, didn't we?" She didn't answer, but she leaned against me, her shoulder warm against mine. It was the closest we'd been in years. The next days were a blur of wedding prep flowers, catering, a playlist that made Lily groan and me laugh. Ethan joined us, his lawyerly calm a balm to our chaos. Mom hovered, her pride evident in every smile. But there were moments when Lily's guard went back up, when she'd snap or withdraw, and I'd feel the distance again. I didn't push, but I didn't retreat either. I was learning her, learning us. One night, she invited me to her bachelorette party, a small gathering at a local bar. I expected tension, but her friends welcomed me, their laughter easing the knot in my chest. Lily was radiant, her hair loose, her smile unguarded. As we danced, she grabbed my hand, pulling me close. "I'm glad you're here," she whispered, and I felt tears prick my eyes. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. The week before the wedding, we hit a snag. The caterer canceled, and Lily spiraled, her composure cracking. "This is a sign," she said, pacing her apartment. "Everything's falling apart." I took her hands, forcing her to look at me. "Nothing's falling apart," I said. "We'll fix this. Together." She stared at me, then nodded, a spark of trust in her eyes. We spent the night calling vendors, securing a new caterer by dawn. As we collapsed on her couch, exhausted but triumphant, she said, "You didn't give up." I smiled, my heart full. "Not on you." For the first time, I believed we could rebuild not the past, but something new. The wedding day dawned bright, the air humming with possibility. I stood in Lily's apartment, helping her into her dress, the silk gliding over her skin like a promise. She was nervous, her hands trembling as I zipped her up. "You look beautiful," I said, and she met my eyes in the mirror. Her smile soft. Thanks to you, she said, and I felt a warmth I hadn't known I'd been missing. The church was alive with flowers and laughter, guests milling under the stained glass light. I stood by Lily's side, her maid of honor a role she'd offered me a week ago, her voice hesitant but sincere. I'd cried then, and I was fighting tears now as she walked down the aisle, her arm linked with Dad's. Mark waited at the altar, his eyes shining, and I saw the love that anchored her. The ceremony was perfect, every vow a thread stitching us closer. At the reception, I gave a speech, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. Lily, I said, you're my sister, my hero, my home. I'm sorry I wasn't always there, but I promise to be now. The room blurred as I spoke, and when I sat, Lily reached for my hand, her grip fierce. We danced late into the night, the music loud, the wine flowing. Ethan spun me around, laughing like we were kids. Mom and Dad joined us, their smiles tentative but real. Lily pulled me aside as the night wound down, her eyes bright. I was wrong, she said. You do matter. You always did. I hugged her, tears falling, and felt the weight of a decade lift. But healing wasn't linear. The next day, as we cleaned up, Lily snapped at me over a misplaced centerpiece, her old sharpness resurfacing. I took a breath, refusing to let it sting. We're okay, I said, touching her arm. She nodded, her anger fading. We're okay, she echoed, and I knew she meant it. I stayed in town after the wedding, helping Lily and Mark settle into their new life. We had coffee, argued over paint colors for their apartment, laughed over old photos. Ethan joined us sometimes, his presence steady, and Mom hosted dinners that felt less like battlegrounds. Dad was quieter, but he listened, his silence is warmer now. One evening, Lily and I sat on her balcony, wine glasses in hand, the stars bright above us. I was scared you'd leave again, she admitted. After the wedding, I thought you'd go back to Chicago and forget us. I shook my head, my heart full. I'm not going anywhere, I said. Not this time. She smiled, and we sat in silence, the kind that didn't need words. I knew we weren't fixed, not completely. There'd be more fights, more tears, more moments when the past would rear up. But we were trying, and that was enough. I'd come back to prove I belonged, but I'd found something better, a family that, despite everything, was mine. 6 months later, I was still in Connecticut, my Chicago life on hold. I'd taken a freelance design job, working remotely, my laptop perched on Mom's dining table. Lily and I saw each other weekly, sometimes for coffee, sometimes to bicker over her new apartment's decor. Our fights were smaller now, less venomous, but they reminded me that love was messy, imperfect, worth it. One Sunday, Mom hosted another dinner, the table set with her best china. Ethan was there, teasing Lily about her cooking, while Mark laughed, his arm around her. Dad carved the roast, his hand steadier, and Mom smiled, her eyes bright with something like peace. I sat in my old seat, the wood still smooth under my fingers, but it didn't feel like a trap anymore. Lily raised her glass, her gaze meeting mine. To Claire, she said, her voice clear. For coming back. For staying. The room stilled, and I felt tears prick my eyes. To family, I said, lifting my glass, and they echoed me, their voices weaving together. For the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt like I belonged. We ate, laughed, argued over dessert. Lily rolled her eyes when I stole her slice of pie, but her smile was real. Ethan told a terrible joke, and Dad chuckled, a sound I hadn't heard in years. Mom squeezed my hand, her warmth a reminder of all we'd survived. As I looked around the table, I saw us not perfect, not whole, but trying. And that was enough. Later, Lily and I walked to the park, the night cool and quiet. I'm glad you didn't give up, she said, kicking a pebble. I didn't make it easy. I laughed, nudging her shoulder. You never do. But you're worth it. She grinned, and we sat on the swings. The creak of the chains of familiar comfort. I knew I'd go back to Chicago eventually, but not to escape. I'd visit, call, show up not just for birthdays, but for the small moments, the messy ones. I'd learned that family wasn't about perfection, but presence. And I was here, finally, where I belonged. As we swung, the stars above us bright, I thought of that disastrous dinner, of Lily's words that had cut so deep. They'd been a challenge, a cry for me to prove I cared. And I had. We had. Together, we'd rewritten our story, not a fairy tale, but something real, something ours.